Kimberly, thanks for inviting me here. And thank you for all coming to learn a bit about biochar. And I hope that this stimulates some thought and stimulates some ideas of how, if you're from a farming entity, that you can incorporate biochar into your program. We all hope you bloody well do. 1 or 2 minutes about me. I've been involved with biochar for probably 20 odd years. I started off with a US entity which was great with ideas but very poor in terms of practicality and putting anything together that actually worked and would function. This was when I was living in Bendigo. I also started off with a group of people like-minded with the poultry industry in central Victoria called the Northern Poultry Cluster. And back 17, 18 years ago, they were extremely keen on doing biochar and bioenergy because they produced something like 70 or 80,000 tonnes of organic waste from broiler sheds, egg-laying sheds and also manufacturing, and congregate all their waste material and put it into one great big huge process and turn it into biochar, put it back on the fields. And the principal driver back then was emissions trading and stopping them spreading raw poultry litter and manure on farms. I thought that would be squashed. And then we had the GFC, the global financial crisis. That was all squashed. Any idea of emissions in Australia, emissions trading, emissions impediments, sort of disappeared and the pressure was off. So that side of things disappeared, so we didn't get that huge facility going just outside of Bendigo. Nevertheless, I pursued what I was doing and developed some technology, and I was fortunate to do it around the world and put in a few small installations. But along that journey, I met Peter Burgess and Ian Stanley very early on in this, and those two guys are the principal partners who started the Rainbow Bee group. And their focus from day one was getting bulk biochar into the ground to sequester carbon, put it in the ground in the topsoil where it will do its most good and stop that stuff going up in the atmosphere. And their driver was, let's make a system that produces energy the most efficient way. And so that was what they focused on, and it took them a long time to develop it. And then they achieved it. They were able to target, in particular, glass house operations, where they require a lot of energy to heat those glass houses for 8 or 9 months of the year. It's a huge amount of energy that they consume. They started off with a small operator just outside of Mount Gambier at a little place called Tantanoola, Holla Fresh, a herb grower, and that facility has been operating since probably 2019, going along about 6 years now. And the energy there means they don't use LPG gas, which is huge. The next installation is not very far from here, Katunga Fresh, just outside of Numurkah, probably half an hour north of Shepparton. I suppose I shouldn't really need to tell you that, you all know where it is. And that's a big facility. It's a $25 million facility. It's a facility that will produce 10,000 to 14,000 tonnes of wet biochar per annum out of cereal straw, which is sourced from farmers in northern Victoria and southern New South Wales. I come from Berrigan. Some of the hay, the straw that's going to be used, actually comes from Stuart Shifley in that area. So there's the win-win. You know, we're taking a raw material that's basically wasted and using it for energy production for the glass house and turning into biochar, which can go back into the fields. Unfortunately, it's been a perfect storm of financial crises between Rainbow Bee, the company that I'm representing really here today, In terms of delivering the technology, we're late, 18 months late. So that's got a financial impact. And the glasshouse operator, you probably heard back in May last year, they had brown rogus tomato virus. That shut that facility for 3 months. He's got over 100 direct employees, and there's probably another 100 odd people that depend on it in terms of contractors, you know, logistics, fertiliser suppliers, etc., etc. That's shut down for 3 months. That is huge, and that is a big operator there. That operation, because he focuses on winter production, that shut out 1/3 of East Coast Australia's tomato production for that 3 months. So that gives you some idea of the financial impact that he has had. So, you know, we're working our way through that, and hopefully, you know, we basically had commissioned 1/3 of the facility and operating really, really well. We were actually generating more energy than we had calculated, so that was huge. But at the moment we're in a hiatus state, and hopefully that we get over that situation very, very quickly. Okay. So the catalyst for biochar research and development and now commercialisation is Terra preta de Indio, Indian black soil from the Amazon basin. This black stuff here is all based on charcoal. The indigenous population have been doing this for, they believe, 8,000 years. It's sustained on these isolated pockets of black humic soil in the Amazon basin, where the soil is just the most depleted, raw clay soils on the planet. Because of the high rainfall and the dynamics of a tropical rainforest, you don't get soil carbon going into the soil. It doesn't get there. When a tree falls over and dies, it's consumed and decayed within a couple of years, and it's back into the vegetation. So it's dynamic. There's no carbon that goes into the soil. It's horrible soil. But you've got these probably up to, 20 to 40 hectare plots right through the Amazon basin. And for centuries, they were thought to be a natural occurrence. And until researchers in the 1960s, Dutch and American scientists got in there and said, they found pottery shards, fish bones. Hey, this isn't natural, this is man-made. And it was a revelation to them and a revelation to all of us. And it's what we want to see and do around the planet. Rejuvenate our soils with waste biomass. We're not saying grow a biomass crop and cook it and put it in the soil. We're saying use the waste that we're now just letting go back decay, and 95, 98% of it goes up into the atmosphere as CO2. Let's incorporate it as this. So, sorry Melissa, I pulled a bit out of Anne's big. So I'll let this play, and this will give you a bit of background on what biochar is, the very core of what it is and how you do it, and where the Australian New Zealand Biochar Industry Group wants to go and develop that into a flourishing industrial process for all of us to utilise.
It is made by heating any form of organic matter, biomass, in a controlled process with limited oxygen called pyrolysis. This product is called biochar when it is used as a soil amendment or for other uses that store the carbon in a durable form. Through the use of these technologies, we can capture, utilise and store carbon for the long term. We can reduce waste. We can produce clean and renewable bioenergy. And we can remove CO2 from the atmosphere. More than 50 million tonnes of residual biomass, including agricultural residues, green waste, and other organic waste, is burned or landfilled every year in Australia. This is a waste of a valuable resource. It also causes pollution, including greenhouse gas emissions. But these wasted resources can be turned into a solid form of carbon, biochar. Globally, every year, biochar could sustainably remove billions of tons of excess CO2 already in our atmosphere, while also enhancing food production and regenerating degraded lands. Over 99% of CO2 captured by biomass re-enters our atmosphere as part of the natural carbon cycle. Pyrolyzing wasted plant biomass into biochar intercepts the cycle and converts carbon into a form that is typically stable for centuries to millennia. Biochar is a sustainable and climate-friendly way to transform organic resources into a valuable carbon product and renewable energy for a circular, regenerative, new carbon economy. There are also many proven and emerging markets for biochar that increase profitability and reduce or draw down carbon. Agriculture, horticulture, livestock, cropping, animal feed to improve animal health and reduce methane emissions, soil carbon sequestration, water management and filtration, mine and land rehabilitation, building and construction. With more uses of biochar emerging, the global market is growing rapidly and is forecast to reach almost 4 billion by 2025. Australia is on the cusp of developing a world-leading biochar industry thanks to our testing, technologies, research and high-potential resources. Antrig's Code of Practice is guiding industry best practice for sustainable production, classification and safe use of biochar. Australia's industry is ready to scale up and create important economic, social and environmental opportunity, becoming a billion-dollar industry by 2030. What is the next step? We need commitment and leadership from corporates, capital, government, entrepreneurs and academics. The Australian Biochar Industry 2030 Roadmap outlines a pathway forward for biochar industry scale-up.
Okay, that's a great little introduction into biochar. Why is biochar so good? Its porosity, its surface area. If you look at a piece of biochar and you pick it up, or charcoal, you look at it and it's light and it's black and it's just carbon really. But it's the surface area in there, the porosity. That's what gives it its ability to hold on to moisture, for moisture retention. It's got a huge cation exchange capacity. You know, a good soil will have 20 mole per kilogram C cation exchange capacity. Biochar has got that as a minimum. Goes up to 100, 120. It's got a massive cation exchange capacity, and as it ages, it gets better. And those little holes, those little pores in there, they're also a habitat. I look at it as a housing complex in the soil for beneficial soil bacteria and fungi. You know, the good fungi, the VAM fungi that work with plants, find the nutrients, find the moisture. all that symbiotic processes in the soil will work so much better when this stuff is in the soil. So once again, I've pinched something from Ansby again. This is just basically touches on what biochar can do. And these are basically reviews of what's been out there. And when I say what's out there, it's 6,000 plus scientific research papers been written on the agronomic benefits of biochar, let alone the industrial benefits for biochar. So there's a huge volume of knowledge out there, and we're trying to turn it into practicality. As touched in the video, 50% of global soil carbon has been released to the atmosphere. That's just through our Western agricultural practices and our forestry practices. And biochar is a way to recycle carbon back to the soil where it belongs. Benefits were assessed in these reviews. The first one here is basically, all of them actually, are coming from Stephen Joseph and Associates. Stephen Joseph, who lives just south of Newcastle, Terrigal, is Australia's eminent guru of biochar. There's probably two in the world that are the pinnacle in terms of knowledge on biochar. Stephen Joseph and Johannes Lehmann at Cornell University in the States. So Stephen deduced increase in agricultural production pending biochar application rates, a very ambiguous term, 10 to 42% increase. You can also translate that you can save fertiliser by 10 to 42% as well. And pending biochar application rate. Boy, this is huge because you can put a little bit on constantly and get fantastic results. South Australian No-Till Farmers Association, on their mostly calcareous soils, they had done work since 2008 on biochar, and they've been getting positive results from putting in 35 kilograms at sowing with their fertiliser, up to 70 kilograms, but some of the best results were at 35 kilograms of biochar. They just basically blended biochar with your DAP or MAP and sowed as per normal, no difference to their normal program. Paul Blackwell, 2008, 2009, he was a research scientist for the West Australian DPI. They were obtaining fantastic results from just putting in or direct drilling. This is when controlled traffic, GPS was just starting to get established. So they used that technology to pre-drill where the grain was going to be sown with 1 tonne per hectare. And they followed those fields for only 2 years, admittedly, but once again, getting fantastic results from just putting a small amount on. You can go the other way, which is where a lot of my work with Rainbow Beta has been, and putting a once-off application, and that can be anywhere from 10 tonnes per hectare to 40 tonnes per hectare. And you don't touch it again, basically. You might have to add a little bit here and there, but that might be in 20 years' time, 30 years' time. And that aspect of putting on one huge amount, once off, never again, is a testament to what biochar or charcoal, the longevity of it. Latest research coming out of Austria, it was published in 2024, has determined that biochar, most biochars that are produced in the world, not specific technologies, not specific feedstocks, but it will last in the soil for 1 million years. That is just insanely, how do you get your head around that? We don't use that terminology, you put this stuff in, it'll last for 1 million years. We say it'll last for tens of thousands of years. I'm sure that work will get challenged, there'll be more research that will look at it, but that just gives you some idea of how long this stuff stays in the soil. It's not like lime or gypsum, dolomite, got to put 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3 tonnes per hectare. 3 years' time, you've got to put a bit more on, or a bit more on. Once off. You can do it that way. Or you can go the other extreme, a little bit constantly. This research here, increasing of phosphorus availability in the soil by a factor of up to 4.6 times. That actually comes out of New South Wales DPI at their research station at Wollongbar. Maybe Lucas will touch on that when he does his presentation. But we have so much phosphorus that's bound in the soil, and it takes a lot of microbial activity to get it available for the plant to use and for us to grow our grain and fodder and fibre out of it. Biochar, there's an interaction between iron and everything. There's like a battery effect in the soil, but it will unbind that phosphorus and make a plant available. Fantastic. Reduce non-CO2 gas emissions by 12 to 15%. Increase in water holding capacity. Very applicable to us in the irrigation areas and a variable climate that we have. And in a year like this where water is tight and expensive. He doesn't state here, Stephen, but there was fantastic research came out of Rice University looking principally at California in the States, which has a similar climate to us, very Mediterranean. Far better soils. They're not farming on topsoil like that. They're farming on topsoil that's from the roof to the bloody floor here. But they were finding between 18 and 40% reduction in irrigation requirements. That's a massive aspect of it.
Russell, would you mind, just a couple of things, because I developed that.
Yeah.
Probably a few of them. So I chair the Biochar industry group, and I think Russell's doing an amazing job up there. So those 4 dot points are actually summarised from 4,000 papers. So Stephen Joseph's paper you're referring to, it's actually a summary of 4,000 papers about when biochar works and when it doesn't work. And so when I talk later, I will actually talk about application rates and responsible application rates, because those lower rates in poor soils are important, and there's a suggested rate of in very poor soils of not going any more than 300 kilo per hectare per year and doing it gradually. The higher rates work more so in horticultural situations, but biochar should always be used with something else. It should be inoculated. It's a medium. It's not, and you'll probably get to that, I will later. If not.
Yeah, I mean,
you can use it on your own, but there is, Sanford, who you mentioned, had also quite negative results, but they did that on purpose when they went too high. They had too high rates and they actually got a reduction in yield. So it is really important to understand the properties of biochar, which I'll talk about later, and its responsible use. But I just thought I'd qualify that. And I'm sure when you put those high rates on, you would have applied it with something, yeah? That tends
We'll touch on that.
Yes, of course. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask why it doesn't break down? Like if you look at our soils and you'll get a carbon over a partial paddock and you'll get a black top which is full carbon, which eventually breaks down and drifts off into the atmosphere. Why doesn't this, in layman's terms, why doesn't this stuff do the same?
Why doesn't it stay in the soil?
No, why doesn't biochar do the same as what carbon is sitting at the top, eventually just drift off into the atmosphere? What properties in layman terms stops it from evaporating into the air?
The structure of biochar is so tightly bound between carbon. There's maybe a little bit of silica here or a bit of phosphorus here or something like that. But it's the structure is so stable. It means that the microbes and the bacteria, fungi in the soil can't actually mine it. Yes, it's a carbon source, but it's so tightly bound that they can't munch it and take it away and use it for their own energy. I mean, carbon in the soil, like you're alluding to, is actually food for microbes and fungi. They'll use that for their own metabolic requirements. And carbon in the soil. They term it labile carbon. So it's polysaccharides, it's sugars, it's cellulose, it's things like that which are food. Biochar isn't food; it's too tightly bound. Now, I've been doing this sort of work with Rainbow Beta for 2021 to 2025, and still ongoing. Now, the approach that we have taken is going to be different to what Melissa is talking about. So there's yin and yang. There's no definitive, this is the way it has to be done, that is the way it has to be done. There's flexibility, and you have to really work out what you want to do with it. And I'll try and explain that, and hopefully I'll get there. But our application rates were typically at 1 to 5% of topsoil on a volume to volume basis. This is based on Doug Powell in Western Australia, who is an avocado grower and beef breeder. But when he plants a new row or grove of avocado, he will incorporate this large amount of biochar, which he sources from a producer over there in Western Australia quite cheaply, and then incorporates it and then plants his avocados. There's a paper, Melissa would know about it, maybe some of you do know about it, but if you do, look up Doug Powell biochar and you'll get a link to that paper, and you'll be able to discern, just read the summary and the outline, and you'll get a grasp of what he's doing. So on that basis, say it's 5%, that actually works out at around about 40 wet tonnes of biochar per hectare. Based on Doug Powell, that biochar that he put in the soil was just raw biochar. And I'm going to make a point that through these trials, principally all of them will be done with raw biochar. The biochar has been made from wood, pine chips, which is basically sourced from the facility at Tantanoola in South Australia, where, of course, it's the forestry basis of Australia, basically, or in that part of the world. At this stage, they are not amended biochars. I am not saying you don't amend biochars. Personally, I'm with Melissa. Always put some organic matter in there, some life in it. If you go back to my analogy that it's a housing complex in the soil, okay, you've got the rooms, now you've got to fill up the cupboard, you've got to make the bed. You've got to put a bit of nitrogen, phosphorus, you've got to put a bit of labile carbon compounds, which biology can do, which is, your compost teas, compost extracts. You can even do it with a little bit of, soluble fertilizer, a bit of urea. But put something in there, you will get the most benefit, because the problem that you will have or can have with a raw biochar is what they call the hockey stick effect. When you put it in, productivity goes down for 1 or 2 years, because what's happening, you're putting in fertilizer to feed your crop. You've got the housing complex from biochar, the soil microbes, bacteria and fungi are going gangbusters. Population is exploding, and they're grabbing your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your calcium, your sulfur, and they're taking it away from your crop. So you get that little hockey stick effect. While they're doing this exponential growth pattern, when they get into equilibrium, which may take a year, may take 2 years, then you'll get that wonderful benefit that biochar has. And then bang, then you get your productivity growth. You're getting 20, 30, 40% increase in productivity. Our biochars are 80% fixed carbon biochar. Getting back to your point, fixed carbon is what soil microbes can't consume. It's the stable part of it. And we're simulating once-off maximum biochar applications. Crop trials with biochar, all conducted on riverine Victoria, New South Wales farms. One exception, mangoes, Northern Territory, Humpty Doo. Not really quite 100% correct. Broccoli, broccolini, canola, citrus, corn, potatoes and sunflowers. These were the crops we have been trialling at this stage. Crop yield responses and what's happening. With the broccoli, this is at a farm at Biochar on the other side of the river. Big broccoli asparagus grower. We couldn't determine any yield difference because we tried, but all these growers will use contract pickers, contract picking teams. Well, they don't want to stuff around measuring stuff. So unless you physically get out there and do it yourself and take off a lot of their product, and I don't know what a tray of broccoli is worth, but it's worth a bit. They get a bit nasty when you're bloody pulling off a few trays. They don't like that. So we didn't get any yield response. But the good thing we did find was this effect in terms of what the nitrogen in the plant, what form of nitrogen in the plant it was. With biochar, it was ammonium dominant. Without biochar, it's nitrate dominant. Both forms of nitrogen in plants can use readily. There's no real issues with that. But AusVeg has flagged nitrates are a probable carcinogen. We are going to get regulated on high nitrates in our leafy green vegetables and all those forms of crop. With biochar, it flips it. It changes the nitrogen cycle in the soil and how the plants interact with the microbes in the soil and flips it. So that was a real positive. Broccolini, Frank Cantanzarati at Griffith, 10 or 15% yield increase. He's been trialling biochar since 2015. Did it 2015, 2016 and in 2022. 2015, 2016 he used amended biochars and they had a sea emulsion mineral complex added to the biochar to enhance it, amend it. And he was getting consistently 10 or 15% yield increase with that. When we supplied him in 2022, it was raw biochar. He only put on, it was 1 tonne over a hectare and at a low rate incorporated in the hill. And if you remember, 2022 was that really, really wet spring. Frank supplies Perfection Fresh, a big wholesale group in vegetables and fruit. All the broccolini growers around the country were just, if the wet weather's stuffing us up, we can't do it. Where that biochar was added, he had 30, I didn't state it here, but he had around about 20 or 30% more than anywhere else on the farm. He was able to supply broccolini where other farmers weren't. So we don't understand what was happening, but that was a positive effect. Canola, once again, and this is at 10 to 20 tonnes per hectare rates, 10 to 15% yield increase. Corn, 24% yield increase. Potato, in the first year 11%, second year a negative effect, 7% down. Sunflowers, 20%. These raw biochars seem to work very, very well when you've got high input crops. Canola, you're looking at 600 kilos of high analysis fertiliser per hectare per crop. Corn, 1.1, 1.2 tonnes of high analysis fertiliser per hectare. So we're deducing that when you've got that high input, you're getting the adsorptive capacity of biochar to hold that nutrient so that the plant can fully utilise it rather than see a lot of it flush through or volatilise. So we're getting a positive effect with a raw biochar in those instances. Yeah. So biochar production. Some of you might want to do it yourself. I've got a picture here of what we call a Kentucky kiln. The concept is it's just a bit like a funny looking fire pit, basically. It's got a steep angle side. They're very cheap to make. That kiln there is fully utilises a 240 centimetre by 120 centimetre sheet of Corten steel plate sheet, and you can make these kilns for, you know, under $1,000 pretty easily, as long as you've got someone who can do a cone. That will make about 300 litres of biochar. If you're doing it at a high rate, once off application, you probably need at least 10 or 12 litres per square metre, so that might do 25, 30 square metres per burn. You might be able to set up 3 or 4 of these. One person can run 3 or 4 of these by staggering them with a big pile of sticks or material in the middle. That's a very labour-intensive way of doing it. It's also a good way to have an afternoon with a bottle of wine or something like that, and while away the time and have a bit of fun with the kids. And a fire is always good fun. Is it practical for a broadacre farmer here at Deniliquin with putting in 2 or 3 or 4,000 hectares of crop? Probably not. And so the next one is, or rely on commercial producers to supply low-cost biochar. That's the rainbow bead system at Katunga. There's a series of 6 modules there. The biochar coming out of that facility is, at this stage, probably $350 a wet tonne coming out of there, when it does come out of there. Soon, hopefully. And that was the premise going back to what we were doing. You know, this is set up on the other side of this wall are 2 bays for B doubles to be loaded. The idea is for bulk exploitation. Those B doubles will be going out onto a farm for the farmer to do what he wants to do with it. And at this stage, probably the biggest consumer from this facility is not going to be a farmer, it's going to be an asphalt manufacturer. You can actually make, adding biochar to a cold emulsion asphalt makes a stronger asphalt. It makes an asphalt that at the end of the day can be recycled and reused into another road, which at the moment, if it's just a straight bitumen-based emulsion, you can't really do it. You can't just dig it up, reheat it, put it back into another road. You really have to dump it, put it into landfill, or use it as a base for something else. And another aspect was also using it for concrete. Using biochar in concrete saves on cement, which is just basically calcium oxide from lime. But you can make a stronger, more durable and cheaper concrete using biochar. So that's the other aspect. And until we can get a volume of local consumption in terms of cereal growers who probably would like to supply straw to the facility and then get biochar back, in the future we'd be looking at that sort of arrangement. I think that pretty much does me, Kimberly. I'd love to take any questions if you have them. I'm probably getting close to the time anyway.
Are there any questions for Russell? Hayley?
How do you, in a practical broadacre cropping situation, does it come in a form that has to be spread, or is it pelleted so it can run through a combine?
If you're adding it to compost, that is fantastic. If you're making a compost, always put the biochar in at the very beginning with your raw material. You'll find you'll have a hotter compost and the composting process will be faster. Instead of taking 12 weeks, you'll probably do it in 7 or 8 weeks. And you'll have a fantastic product out of it. In terms of spreading it, some of the work I did with the poultry industry, this is going back to 2009, we had federal grant money for 1 year, unfortunately just 1 year, but that was just basic. One of the things we did was just surface applied a small amount of biochar and then direct drilled crops into it. And it was a drought year, and what we saw was with just a small, like 100 kilograms of biochar per hectare spread on the soil was equivalent production to normal application, which was 70 or 80 kilograms of DAP. So in that drought scenario year, it worked very, very well, just surface applying it. But this was a poultry litter-based biochar, so you've got a certain amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, a lot of calcium, sulfur, potassium. You know, it's a broad spectrum. It was really a broad spectrum fertiliser, a light fertiliser, but a broad spectrum fertiliser. We wouldn't have got that effect if we were using, say, straw coming out of that Katunga Fresh facility. But surface applying it can work. It'll certainly work very well, I think, in a grazing situation, because you'll find that the soil biology in terms of, you know, worms will actively seek it out because they like to consume it. It activates their gut. Ants, for some reason, seem to love it. They'll incorporate it into the soil. We had in that particular year, we had a stand at the Elmore Field Days, and we had a trial plot put out just the back of it. And we found after 12 months, we couldn't see any biochar on the surface. We don't think it blew away. Could have been a bit of that. But we did find char particles down, 20 centimetres in the soil profile. So something was happening. And what we also found was filaments of VAM fungi everywhere. So, yeah, surface applying it can work, but perhaps not universally. It's better to incorporate it. Not that you want to really plough fields up all the time, but if you've got an instance where we really do have to plough this, surface apply it and incorporate it that way.
Let's put in it like there's this farmer's guide that Anthony put out, which is on the website.
Yeah.
How what's the reserve of biochar. I'll cover off on it a bit more later as well, but depends on the use that we talk to as well. But there's this bio that's available on the ANSBIG website about biochar applications and rates as well.
Further to that, I'm north of Drury, and we've got some shitty, highly stable soils in there, which are great for growing rice, Russell. But our topsoils, it's very limited.
Yeah.
And our issue is actually getting penetration of water into making the soil more deep. So I would suggest this is a great thing if you can get it in the soil, so to speak.
Exactly. There's, I don't think it'd be in what Stephen and Paul did with the handbook, but in Western Australia they use rippers to break up the hardpan, and what they also fit on those rippers are soil inclusion plates. So they'll surface apply lime or gypsum over the top, and they'll go in with the rippers with these soil inclusion plates, and as the implement goes through, what's been applied in the very topsoil actually falls down into these cavities behind the tine. And I think that would be a fantastic way of incorporating biochar, so that you actually had slots of biochar in the field. There are a couple of people that can incorporate it in a similar fashion. Frank Harney at Elmore has an implement where it'll take around about 10 cubic metres of material. He uses compost, but it's got tines with a similar sort of inclusion plate behind it, so As the soil has been opened up and spread, the compost or biochar can fall into that slot, so you get these slots and go down into that compacted, sodic subsoil, and then let nature do its course. Then you'll find the van fungi going out, and then you'll see plant roots going down. They're going to give you a bit more organic carbon, and you know that little aperture there will spread over time.